Welcome to Busy Bee Living. Today we are going to construct a shadow box for a very special jersey. Now we're going to go ahead and break down our material here, and what we're using is ambrosia maple. I thought it would give a little bit of cool characteristics on this side, so we're just going to go ahead and break this piece down now, and we're actually going to go ahead and cut the 45s for our miters before we're going to rip it down. This is something I haven't tried in the past, but I thought it would really come in handy to make sure that every piece is at the same length according to the door as well as the actual box frame. So we're going to have a little trick here. I just notched a little bit into the wood to show where that blade was going to come down. Then I lined up the 45 instead to the end there, and it actually allowed me to save the piece as much as possible and get right to the edge on that 45. So it was a nice little trick that I actually just came up with on the fly there. I'm not sure if anyone else has done it before in the past, I'm sure, but it came in handy, so I thought I'd share that. So we're going to go ahead and cut down the shorter now 45s. Once again though, just make sure that you actually have the piece turned to the proper way, because you do not want two 45s going the wrong angles and you're going to waste all this material. So double check that right before you go ahead and cut that. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to come over to our table saw and we're going to rip all our pieces down. Now for the box, we're going to have a top, bottom, and two sides, as well as for the door we want a top, bottom, and two sides as well. So when you come to each one of these pieces, now the shorter one is going to be the tops and bottoms for both the frame itself as well as the door. So that one piece you want to keep to the side because we're going to rip two smaller pieces out of it. We're going to go ahead and rip our two long edges for the box. And then we're going to go ahead and once we have that completed, we want to reset our fence to the proper width for the door because we obviously don't need that thick of a door. So it's a little tighter squeeze in here. You definitely want to use a push block here to keep your fingers safe. We're going to go ahead and rip those pieces down. Now we're just going to come over to our assembly table here and we're just going to do a quick dry fit just to make sure everything's coming together properly and properly square as well. So we check the door as well as the box itself. Now that we have our dimensions of our shadow box done, we can actually go ahead and cut the back and get that ready. But we also want to put a little rabbet in the back of the cabinet here, in the back of the shadow box I should say. And that rabbet's going to accept that 1/4 inch piece of ply for the backing of the actual shadow box. Now to save time, we don't use a dado blade. We actually just use this sacrificial fence so we can get the blade pretty close to the actual fence itself, and then we just run a couple of passes to get that 1/4 inch rabbet that we need to accept the backing. Now with that complete, we're ready for our glue up. So we're going to go ahead and we're also going to get our pin nailer out here so it can hold it into place until that glue dries. We're going to use just a quick glue up here, hold the 45s together, and then we can bring that pin nailer in here to tack it together until the glue dries. Now with the frame all tacked together, we just dry fit our backing, and you can see we're happy that it fit. So we're going to add some glue now. Attach our backing with some staples as well. I feel like those hold the 1/4 inch a little bit better. And you can see we just come in here with our stapler and just tack it all the way around. That'll hold it into place until that glue dries. But once it's completely dry, we're just going to go ahead, we're going to actually spray paint the interior with a flat black so there's no glare or anything like that in there. But we don't want to do the edges of the actual shadow box. So we're going to throw some painter's tape down here. So when we go ahead and spray, no overspray will get on top of there. Now, if you get a little bit of paint bleeding through on the tape, that's fine, because we're actually going to come back and sand here. We want to use our air compressor, blast out any dust that might be in there, and real quick, just hit it with our flat black spray can. And you can see it takes on pretty well, and we can remove it, and there you go. And on a serious note, yeah, sanding's never really that fun. If anyone out there really enjoys it, let me know. I got plenty of stuff that you can go at. But we're going to go ahead and hit it with the sand here. We started with a 120 and we dropped down to a 220 sand, just prepping it because we are actually going to hit the actual shadow box with ebony stain. That way we still get the grain marks, especially that maple ambrosia. We'll get some darker grain in there, and it'll kind of look a little bit, you know, unique and different from what you can find out there. You can come back with that air compressor like you saw we just did, and then come with a tack cloth and wipe up any dust that might be there. And now you're ready to go ahead and stain. Now when we stain, we just use, you know, cloth rags here, and we'll hit it with a little bit of stain and then wipe off the excess. That way it doesn't go too dark on us. It will also, if you wipe within the direction of the grain, it stops yourself from getting those swirl marks or anything like that in stain, which just looks horrible and you don't want that. So definitely always go with the grain and wipe down when you're done. And if you need to, you can always add a little bit more to darken it, but it'll keep a really nice finish if you use this technique. Now we're going to bring our attention back to our door, and we're going to assemble it the same way we did the base itself. So we're just going to bring our miters, do a quick glue up here, and then we're going to tack it in with our pin nailer just to hold it in place until the glue will dry. You can throw some clamps on these. Just when you're clamping miters, you need to use a little bit of tricks there so the clamp will hold properly, but with the pin holding it tight with the glue, I've never had really any issues using this technique. Now off camera, we went ahead and we stained our door here, and now we're going to bring it over to the router table and we're going to start adding the groove to accept the plexiglass. Now we're going to slow step this up all the way to whatever desired level you need. A lot of it has to do with how thick of a plexiglass that you're using, but when you easily step it up, it makes a nice clean cut and it'll leave you a better finish. You don't have to come back and clean up as much. But now the corners are going to be rounded over, so we're just going to take our square here, give some indicator marks. We're going to come back with our hand chisel. We're going to clean those up and square them up so the plexiglass fit in there nice and tight. Now we can come back to our cabinet and we're going to add the mortises here to accept the hinges. Now in this one I'm going to use a little trick. I'm actually going to make these mortises the full depth of the hinge, and that way I'm not going to mortise into the door. It's a technique I haven't really tried yet, but I want to give it a shot here and see how it would work. And in the final product it came out quite well, but there are some tips and tricks to making mortises easier, like using this scrap piece to get a nicer working surface. But I made a whole video on it, and I'm going to leave that little link up above. Go ahead and click on that and you can see how you can make easy to do mortises. But now that we're done with the router, We're just going to come in here with our hand chisel, clean up that edge, make it nice and square, and bring it all the way to the line so the hinges will fit in there properly. Now the hinges fit in there perfectly, but when the door opens, that top portion is going to leave the mortise. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stain these so they will show the ebony stain, and when the doors open you won't see any clear or unfinished pieces of the wood. But now we're going to go ahead and we're just going to hit it with some nice clear satin lacquer. I like this finish. It comes out really nice. In between coats though, definitely sand. Now we're going to have to attach the hinges to the door now, and to make this easier I just lined up the door where I wanted it onto the shadow box, transferred from indicator lines here, and then used my square to go ahead and transfer those all the way to the back side of the door. Now I know where I need to come back and bring my hinge to line up the screw holes. Now once again we're going to go ahead and we're going to use that centering bit to come down, and it's going to put it perfectly in the center, and we're going to know when we attach it, it's going to attach in the proper place, the screws will go down, and the door will shut just as it's supposed to. Now before we go ahead and we attach the door to the shadow box, we're going to want to put the plexiglass into the door itself. So I just use some clear sealant, and I'm going to run some beads all the way around, and then I'm going to clean up anywhere where there's a little more excess than I wanted, because you don't want any squeeze out coming out onto the plexiglass. It's going to fog it and make it look bad. As well as I run my finger around just to kind of give it a nice little bead. And then when you go ahead, you can place the plexiglass down and it'll sit properly without too much squeeze out, or any at all if you did it right. But just make sure you wipe your hands really well, because you don't want to add little fingerprints all over that clear plexiglass either. Now we're also going to want to add these magnet catches to the door so the door will stay shut. And the little trick to do this is I just took the little piece where the screw would go in and I made a little pinhole in the center. Then I come back with these little brad nails and just tap them into where that hole is at. Then I snip off the cap portion of the nail so it has a little point. I can close the door itself, push down, and it'll make an indentation in the middle point on the case. That way I'm transferring the center point of where the magnet's going to go to here to where the metal and screw piece will go into on the shadow box itself. Now it'll line up perfectly and we won't have any issues with it closing. Now with the holes all drilled in the proper place, we can come back and we can screw down the metal plates on the shadow box, and then just with some super glue the magnets into the door side. Now we can bring our attention to the back of the cabinet and we can mount our little brackets here, and that's what we're going to attach our hanging wire to. So we're just going to measure down a certain amount, and then we're going to come back with our little punch here, and that's going to give us our starter holes for our drill so we can pre-drill the screws into the back. Now if you get kind of close to the backing, that's okay, because remember we do have a thicker piece underneath there. But you do want to hand screw these in, as you don't want to over tighten them and then ruin this piece right at the last moment. Now with those mounted in, we can go ahead, measure out our wire, make it cut, and then we're going to put this little knot in here and then some twists to hold it nice and tight. Now I believe this wire will hold up to 25 pounds, so we got some clearance there. But we want to snip off any of the excess that's left over. And I always like to throw a little piece of electrical tape on it And you don't have to do this, but I feel like it really does help protect the wall a little better in case that wire is sticking out. And here's a look of the final display case with the jersey mounted into it. Now, if you're interested in learning how I did that, I'll leave a link in the description below, or I'll leave one of those little clickers here, wherever it is, and you can go find it once it's uploaded. But I'm really happy the way this jersey case came out. Now, one thing you might notice is I didn't put a handle on the door. I left a little bit of a 1/16 of an inch overlay right here on the frame, so you can get a fingernail there and actually open the door that way. That way it keeps the face frame clean of anything, and it's nice and smooth, and the focus can go in on the jersey rather than any hardware that might be showing. Another thing is the jersey, I was thinking about doing an adhesive, like two-sided carpet tape or something like that, to adhere that foam backer to the back of the cabinet itself. But I cut it so close that it actually friction fits inside there. And I like that because if we ever want to change anything on this, we can remove the foam and do any changes like reposition things or anything like that, and then put the foam back up there. So I like the flexibility of that. I always like to leave myself an option to change things, but as you can see, it's holding itself up quite well, and it didn't end up needing that adhesive. Overall, I'm really happy the way the display case came out. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If it's your first time here, we'd love to earn your subscription, and it does help us out as we grow as a channel. If you're a returner, thank you so much for all the support you guys have been doing, and the positive comments below that you guys can share and learn from everything that we've done here, as well as when you take it on the task yourself and sharing different tips and tricks that you come across when you do your own projects. So thank you for that very much. Like I said, if you were interested in the video with the jersey mounting, I'll leave it in the description. And until next time, thanks for buzzing by. You go make some dust.